We're now live.
Yay.
Hi!
Hello, everybody. And for all of you who, hypothetically, will be watching this later, I hope you're doing well. So let's start. The way I like to start is by taking questions people have about what they're doing, because if you have a question, there's a good chance that at least someone, maybe several other people in your class have the same question. Don't have any questions either about twine or branching dialogue, well, okay. If your question isn't about twine or branching dialogue, hold on to it for a moment. We'll take those first if there are any.
I think mine's about twine and branching.
Okay.
So, I've been working on mine all day today. Does it need to loop back and forth like the kicking the ball did, or?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I should probably, at some point I need to replace all my examples, preferably with a wider range of varying functional examples, because the first assignment doesn't actually have to loop, but with that example, almost everyone writes a loop into it.
Okay.
Which isn't a bad exercise. Loops can be useful in branching dialogue, but they are not required.
Okay.
If you were working on a game for your thesis, you need to know how to create a functional loop.
Loop back and forth like the kicking the ball did, or?
No.
I lost her.
In fact,
Hello?
I should probably, at some point I need to replace all my examples.
Is it playing again, or is anyone else hearing?
Playing.
No, I hear you.
Does anyone have the live stream playing? Is it picking it up from somewhere? That example, almost everyone.
Maybe it's DR because he was in the live stream.
Which isn't a bad exercise. Loops can be useful in branching dialogue. They are not required. Actually, it looks like it's coming. Angel, check and see if you've got.
Got it.
Okay.
It's me. Too many screens open.
You had me checking all my screens. I've got too many windows open.
Hey,
I don't know which one to close.
Yeah.
And you're scared to close any of them because you're afraid it's all.
I know.
Yeah.
Which one's connected to this?
I don't know.
That's a perfect example of twining.
Well, it's certainly looping. Michelle, with all the technical chaos there, were you able to catch that? That makes sense?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
I think you said it twice and all.
Yeah. So, other questions?
You brought up a question about my statistical work on the twine, and I wasn't quite sure what that was about. That was in our discussion.
Oh,
personal question.
Okay.
You want me to save that for later?
Well, let's go ahead and address that now. I think what I was trying to get at there was that you had a statistics about game developers, but
Yes.
what's also relevant are the statistics about game players. And I saw someone else post the statistic there that at this point, according to, again, a industry marketing survey, so this is hardly someone who's speaking from the outside. According to their own marketing survey,
Correct.
43% of gamers, of people who buy and play games at this point, are female.
That's what I heard too. I hope maybe that didn't come across well, but I was citing both of those examples because I came across that one and the other one about the development.
More recent one where it was in the high 40s for females.
High 40s. That's
43%.
No, like 46, 47%.
Oh.
Yeah,
And
I thought I'd heard of one where it was really very nearly even. But the
In one of
most
the
recent one I
videos we had
found
to
was
watch,
43.
she said it was half and half.
Yeah, I've heard that too, but
In week one, there was a video, and the woman was saying it's about half and half now.
Is that video games?
that was in the statistical research that I did last week for the discussion. That the the gaming environment is changing. That used to be predominantly male, is now both a mix of male and female gender, equally in many cases.
And that is, I believe, electronic gaming, meaning including computers, including game consoles, and including smartphones,
Yeah.
Yes.
have really changed the dynamics.
Well,
That's true.
that's why women are.
Yeah, that's why they're catching up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes. My wife is
You know,
playing Candy Crush all the time with my
Yeah.
friends,
Oh yeah.
My coworkers are always on their phones.
and I only take breaks for Assassins.
That's a good game.
It is a good game. It's not out yet, but it's coming.
I know.
Was it? Who did I get the zombie? Did I get the zombie game from one of our little posts or whatever in your class? Necromancer.
Zombie game.
I don't know.
That was in this week's thing. What, the story one?
Where I got it from.
Well, I mean, there's so many zombie games in my head that I would have to actually go back over my lessons to figure out which.
The text story had Necromancer in it.
It's one of the children
The
adventures.
zombie game? That's a good idea. Why hasn't somebody thought of that?
The Necromancer story was in this.
You're so funny.
This was one of the choice of games.
Yeah.
Was okay. Yeah.
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 I don't know. That was. I'm sorry. Let me be quiet.
I actually really quite like choice of games. I mean, they're a small company, but they're making it work for them, and they're making it work for them by focusing on the quality of the writing and the range of stories, and making their games available at a relatively low cost across all kinds of platforms. I haven't actually. Go ahead.
Who were you saying you like? That is
Choice of games.
Okay.
Some of their games, they have a couple of games that are free, including Choice of the Dragon and Choice of Broadsides. I think that was where I really decided I need to look into them more, because Choice of Broadsides is an Age of Sail game. But you can choose to play as a female protagonist, and what it does for that is flip the gender roles. It just flips all the pronouns. Some of their games since then do subtler things, but in that game you basically wind up playing in an alternate reality in which the norm in Britain, in Imperial Britain, is that men stay at home with families and women man the Navy, and it works. It all holds up.
But that's pretty accurate though, because gender roles are changing as years go by. So there's more men staying at home and more women going to work. So.
In fact, I recently heard about a study of millennials that showed that in that generation, though not necessarily everything has changed, but that the average millennial man expects to be an involved parent, to co-parent, and expects that similarly the work of domestic work and income earning work is both going to be shared, and will not necessarily be shared in a way that presumes that the domestic work is primarily women's work. I think that's actually a huge step, because in terms of a lot of these things, what you see is that things that have been considered women's work are underpaid and undervalued societally, because it's labor that traditionally was often available for free or for a nominal cost, less than would be the case if a person was needing to make a living wage off of it. And you see this in things like child care, where child care is incredibly important, and it can be very expensive, but child care workers are paid often relatively poorly.
Yeah.
and in other caring professions. And again, this has to do with what has been societally gendered as male and female. And it's good to see the attitudes are changing.
I have a sociology minor, and one of the big topics that we covered was whether or not stay-at-home moms should get like Social Security benefits and stuff like that once their children were grown and out of the house and stuff. When they became of age, if they were allowed to collect, like Social Security checks and stuff like that, based on their work staying at home raising kids.
I think that's a very interesting topic. I read a science fiction novel that actually addressed that, because one of the planets in this universe is, thanks to cloning, an entirely male planet. And people who are employed as designated alternative parents, which is primary caregivers, receive a wage for it. Mm-hmm. At one point, after leaving this planet, the protagonist, I guess you'd call him the protagonist. He's there's definitely kind of a co-protagonist relationship in that story, which one of the things was charming for the fact that it was between a man and a woman without any sexual tension, because he's just simply gay, and she's does have a relationship that doesn't appear in that book at all. But in any way, just to make the point is, at one point she says, well, couldn't that be a really powerful kind of military thing? You basically reproduce by cloning. You could raise an army. He's like, oh no, we could never afford it. The wages alone to raise those children would bankrupt the economy. And she's like, well, most worlds traditionally that work has been done by women without pay. And he's like,
yeah. That's what happened to Star Wars.
There's a video on Facebook right now where they created a fake job interview for like a mom and interviewed real people for it. And,
oh yeah,
I literally just watched it today.
Yeah.
And they were like, what? No pay? What? And be available 365 days a year, 24/7? No vacation? They're like, that's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the first time it's ever really occurred to me, and this is probably going to sound stupid because hindsight 2020, but that you can make statements like that through video games and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is part of what I like about games, and particularly about science fiction and potentially, though it is less often used this way, fantasy, is by taking us out of our everyday world, they can kind of highlight some of these issues and make them really obvious in a way that, among other things, is also more likely to be something that your average reader is going to stop and consider, because whatever social defenses they may have aren't immediately raised, like, oh, well, but she's a mom, so why should she get paid? It's like, oh, wait, yeah, they do have to get someone to raise the children.
Yep.
Ethan of Athos, that's the title of that novel. And it's, I wouldn't say it's, Ethan of Athos. I will, I'll see if I can post a link in like a message I send out after we're done. And it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that it's entirely unproblematic. There are certain things that happen in the course of that setup that might be debatable. Like the planet of Athos, interestingly or amusingly enough, was founded by religious extremists who believed that women were the source of all sin. And by the present day of the narrative, it is inhabited, all its inhabitants are functionally all gay. We never find out if the founding fathers of Athos actually intended for their planet of men to be a kind of homosexual paradise. And the other thing that doesn't get explored is how well that fits with individuals' kind of innate gendering oh, well, okay, excuse me, not gender in this context, but sexual orientation and how Athosian society adapts to deal with that. It's just kind of taken for granted, and so it's an interesting theme. But we don't actually spend any time or much time on the planet itself. Most of it's spent on a space station that is kind of shared space for many different nations. But yeah, it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
And so I'll post a link to it.
And that's from my choice of games, or is that?
No, that one's a novel.
Different?
That's a science fiction novel.
Ethan of Athos. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one, the choice of games sounds like Telltale games, where you've got the variety and create different alternate endings.
Yeah, though one of the biggest differences is that Choice of Games does all their stuff in a very simple, pure text format, like the old Choose Your Adventure books.
Okay.
Yeah. The difference being that most of their games, I think it's actually all of them, have some statistics, like a role-playing game.
Right.
But you're not normally calculating hit points. It's more like the choices you make determine your character's personality, and you may be honest or cunning, and having a high honesty or a high cunning will affect certain options at later points in the game.
Yeah.
The whole idea of kind of digital game books has been making a comeback mainly due to mobile platforms, and some of the leading developers have been in a rush to make them as technically sophisticated as possible. The old kind of D&D inspired Lone Wolf books are...
That's what it sounds like. That sounds like an D&D type of game.
Yeah, but the difference is that, for example, there's a Choice of Romance series put out by Choice of Games that takes place technically in a fantasy world, but it's more like Regency with a touch of magic.
Yeah.
There's also a game called Regency Love that is a graphical game, and it's I think it's for Android as well as iPhone and iPad, but is basically a dating simulator. It's a game where you play as if you were playing in a Jane Austen novel, and you pick witty things to say in conversation and try to decide if any of the young men of means who are in the story are the right one for you.
I don't do well at those games. I don't do well watching that movie, Pride and Prejudice, or those others. My wife can quote them word for word, and I'll sit there and go, I have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah, you guys laugh. I really don't.
I don't know either.
I just got to watch it, and I'm going, okay, why doesn't he just say he likes her? Why does he just not ask her out? I don't understand.
Well, here's something that might actually help, DR.
Yeah.
I've heard people compare Regency, as in, like Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters, the stuff written in the period, as opposed to modern romance set in the period with modern conventions.
Yeah.
To science fiction, because it's set in a very different world. The cultural norms and what is possible are just as different as they are in a science fiction story where the protagonist is a clone who has access to most of the facilities of a modern, let's say, space station, but technically has no human rights.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not saying that with that perspective that you will go and rewatch the A&E Pride and Prejudice and love it, but in terms of kind of understanding it.
I like Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Got the book and the comic.
We have the book.
Yeah, the comic's good too. It's well done. Speaking of, did anybody see the video game, the movie that I posted last week that just came out about the history of video games?
No.
I have it on my to-watch list.
Okay, it was really good. It posts a lot of statistics we just talked about, as well as going through trying to talk about who the founding fathers of video games are and how we got to where we are and where we're going in the next 20 to 30 years. Because when you look at video games in the last 10 years, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
The development. And
For sure.
Think, okay, where are we going to be in 10 to 20 to 30 years down the road? I have. Where do you go when the graphics and the sound quality gets so good? Yeah, they're improving it, but how much more tweaking can they do when it's already looking incredible?
Frankly, I tend to be a bit of a holograms. The holodeck is next.
That's what they were showing, people with the glasses on, and that's one of the possible ways that it's going to change.
I'm a little bit of a techno-skeptic when it comes to the idea that improvements in technology inherently improve games.
Right.
There have been a lot of games that, I think maybe what we're starting to do is come towards the end of the idea that what makes a good game is what would make for a good summer blockbuster.
Right.
Now that the race to make games realer than real is seemingly near completion. I mean, we certainly reached certain aspects of that some time ago when the quality of sound available for games became, as good as CD quality sound, and when the resolution on screens exceeded that the human eye can perceive, and the color density and depth exceeded that of at least the first exceeded that of the average person, and then eventually moved on to exceed that of even people who are, trained artists with, kind of a specialization in color work.
Mm.
I don't think it's all going to move to virtual reality. Some of it will, but the kind of virtual reality setup is great for certain kinds of game experiences.
Right.
It is of no advantage for others. Some of the games I enjoy most, and this, shows my biases, are games that I can, among other things, easily pick up and put back down again. Right. The idea of an immersive experience that puts you into a world such that you completely lose track of where you are, and everything is happening in real time in a kind of constant heartbeat of a fully realized world, is hard to reconcile with my busy life, and especially with
yeah,
and especially with the times when I can maybe game a little, but I'm also trying to keep track of at least one child.
Sure.
Kudos to you.
Yeah. Yeah. The WoW just was too overwhelming for me.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine actually lost his wife and family. He wanted to spend more time playing WoW than anything else, and I'm just going, dude. When you get off work and you're not spending time with your kids and you're staying up all night, and somehow he's kept his job. I have no idea, but
yeah, I live with an addict. He's been playing Diablo since the very first one came out.
Right.
And the house could be burning down around him, and if he's fixing the level, that's it.
Yeah.
So, but he's using it constructively. He's in the game design program.
Ah, there you go.
So.
Well, I sometimes find that both players and people who are game designers, not of every stripe, but many people who are game designers, feel that the goal is that trying to avoid using any buzzwords here, okay? Because words like immersive or addictive sometimes get used without, paying much attention to what they actually mean in the context. But that the most hyper-real experience possible, the most engrossing experience possible is the best game experience. And I think that when you look at certain demographics, some younger people, and you're going to see this, you are hugely going to see this when people who've grown up with video games retire. Some of them will retire into video games. one of the things that's cheaper than a beach house.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people who don't want to be completely engrossed, or whether or not they want it, they can't afford it, or the price would be unacceptable. They would have to sacrifice their family, which I'm neither going to be dismissive of the plight of someone who winds up having relationships fail due to what sometimes gets called gaming addiction, nor am I going to treat the way that people get wrapped up in games as being identical to physiological addiction like alcoholism, because there have been studies that show that you don't have the same changes in the brain, though you do have, in some cases, changes in the way the brain works. It is an issue. I just kind of wanted to walk a middle path on that one, because I won't pretend it's not an issue, but it's not the same as... Anyway, please go ahead.
One thing that's been like a good thing for my husband, though, is that he was really, really, really antisocial before, and he had like no friends. But gaming and finding other people who play the game has made him more social. So when I have my friends that I hang out with, generally, they can come over to our house and bring their husbands and their kids, and my husband plays games with them instead of just kind of like sitting there like, twiddling his thumbs and stuff. So it has been good for him like that.
Well, that's one of the things the movie pointed out, was that so many times gamers are considered these isolated individuals, and yet because the way games have changed and grown, as opposed to sitting alone by themselves playing a game, which is what people think gamers are doing, gamers are really connecting with people not just in their local city or friends that they already know, but we're connecting with people around the world. I ranked in the top 10 with Red Dead Redemption with a guy from Mexico, and he and I would pair up doing shootouts. I've also played with a guy in New York, been playing with a guy in Australia for some games, but I'm getting to play with gamers around the world that I would not know otherwise. So I think that there's a misconception in that games actually allow us to connect with people we wouldn't know and would have never crossed paths had we not been able to connect in this way. And in some cases, we're seeing friendships and as they highlight in the movie, even some marriages. Some people met and played and said, "Oh, we like playing together so well, we should get together outside of this," and have created relationships. I think The Guild was a joke about that web series.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and yeah, that's a reality, is that gaming can be a social outlet for people, including people who have few other social outlets. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who, for a long time, held the record for most hours logged on Morrowind for Xbox.
Wow.
And lives in a small Midwestern town with few people who share his interests. A lot of his social outlets have come through, WoW, and before that, EverQuest.
Yes, yeah.
And also, Deanna, as you said, games can be a way for people who aren't strongly socially inclined to actually become more social and engage with people. I've seen that with games. I've seen that with social media as well. I know people who are sufficiently not socially gifted that they only came into their own in terms of really connecting with more than just a few close friends through games and social media. It gave, among other things, the digital distance gave them a little bit of a reprieve, a chance to kind of focus and get the words right.
And what I want him to do at the time just depends, is what I need him to do is entirely, dependent on my reaction to what my feelings on that.
Well, and, again, in terms of the ways, and, as someone who teaches games writing, I'm very aware of how I'm, in many ways, not a typical gamer. Yeah. I do play games that are networked. But one of the things I go to games for, and maybe this is just on the decline, and is for me part of having grown up with games that were predominantly single player. But I go to games sometimes for my escape because I am at heart very much an introverted person. So it's social free time for me at some of the time.
Well, yeah, it's nice to be able to step away and take an adventure and go play Uncharted or go play Assassin's Creed and tour Italy, France, or become the Native American culture and just kind of experience things. I think even when Assassin's Creed came out, I got more out of it just running around and leaping from rooftop to rooftop than actually playing the game. GTA, I didn't even know there was a game the first 6 months. I thought I had no idea there was a storyline. I was just kind of like running around doing whatever, grabbing a car, driving to it, crashed, or I got arrested and grab another car. I had no idea there was a real game there. So I think that escapism, you don't do that in real life. You don't just run out in the street and grab people's car. I don't take a motorcycle and leap rooftop to rooftop other than on GTA because.
Yeah.
When I crash, I just respawn at the hospital or police station, whichever one caught me, and start all over again.
I think that's the beauty of it. You've got the escape side of it and the social side of it. So it's pretty awesome.
And you can experience things that are not feasible in the real world in a safe environment,
Right.
So that's the fun of it. At least that's what I see.
And like I said in the one lesson on games and violence, I love grand strategy games. I love kind of orchestrating a military campaign. I am, I'm of the opinion that the closest thing that exists to a good war is a war that was fought after all other options really failed, and the few wars we have that seem entirely good in hindsight were rarely entered into for reasons as idealistic as they get painted in the history books. Whether you're talking about, for example, the Civil War, the primary impetus for the Union entering the Civil War was not to free the slaves and end slavery. It wasn't. It was. It's not that wasn't part of the picture, but it's a lot easier to see it that way in hindsight because a great historic wrong was finally ended as a result of that war. Neither America nor France fought, nor any other allies fought World War II to save the Jewish people. For the most part, they didn't even believe that the Holocaust was happening at the time.
Right.
I'm bringing these things up not to try and make a dogmatic case for pacifism, but I'm pretty pacifistic in real life. But I really enjoy war games.
I like the movie War Games. We had the same emphasis, It ran through all the other options and said, wait a second.
I used to play games a lot, but my husband's kind of repelled me away from them. I'm like, no, I'll play.
Well,
that was the one thing that kept coming up in the movie, and I get it at church and at other outlets when people hear that I play games, and there you go, it's so violent. It's so violent. Those video games are so violent, and I just keep going. Have you turned on the television set? Have you read a paper? I don't get the news because one of the things I learned in college was if it bleeds, it leads. That's all they want to talk about is the horrible things that are happening around the city and around the world. I don't want my kids seeing that.
Yeah.
I want to read that every day. It's depressing.
And
there was a kid named Tim that he's got Down syndrome. He has his own restaurant, and it was highlighted on the news. I've been sharing that the last couple of days. It's called Tim's Place. He serves breakfast, lunch, and hugs. I said, those are the stories I want to see.
Yeah, I agree. I want to hear uplifting ones.
Yeah, but that's not going to make the front page of the news. That's not going to be on tonight's headline. Tune in for Tim's Place. Nope, they don't want that. So when I hear violence in video games, I question, are we just picking something to say? Because not all video games have to be about violence, although, again, I'm not saying there's not. It is.
Right.
It's in the name, Assassin's Creed.
Exactly. It's a big
play with violence.
Yeah. But is that the main part of it, or is it, again, more of the... I find that the stories themselves interesting, and I find the adventures, and it's, again, kind of the immersive experience more than just running around shooting people.
Well, we have. I mean, if you look at American media, including fiction and including supposedly nonfiction, like the nightly news, we have a relative obsession with violence,
Yes.
and treat it as universally appropriate in a way that many other first world countries don't. You go to many parts of Europe, and there is more acceptance of nudity and sexuality and tighter controls on gratuitous or highly graphic violence.
That's so true.
Games get the short end of the stick because they're the new kid on the block. That's why people pick on games. It's you look at it and you look at the history of media, and whenever there's a new medium, especially if it's popular with the youth and or some group that is not the kind of dominant element of culture.
Fringe.
Medium, what?
Fringe element.
Yes. It gets attacked. It gets blamed for things. And it's. I believe very much as a parent in being responsible and providing oversight, but I think that oversight is often better provided in the form of explanation and context than anything that resembles a complete ban. There's things that I certainly will not let my 3-year-old play at this point, but in general I would much rather that my children play things that in some cases might include themes that I'm not entirely comfortable with, and talk about those things.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, but eventually they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
You can only hope that you influence them enough that...
Right, but it's just allowing them to grow up. I think part of it is, again, I don't want to push our kids into adulthood too soon, or bring in subjects that are inappropriate, or what I feel to be inappropriate at a certain age. I mean, I've said for years, and you guys heard me say it, I like Grand Theft Auto. I like Red Dead Redemption. It's my favorite game.
Yeah, but do you want
I've got like 8 copies of the game. It's that good. It's my favorite game, but I've said to countless parents, I said, you don't buy this for your 12-year-old. I don't consider that the subject matter is pretty harsh. You've got all sorts of things happening, but I said it's for 18 and up, and if you're 18 and up and you can play it and you can talk about it, then yeah, we can talk about it. But I wouldn't hand that to a 5th grader and say, hey, man, play it because it's got great graphics and I like the music. No.
Well, as a teacher, I got to tell you, I see kindergarten through 8th grade as an art teacher, so there are like 4th graders who play very violent games, and I just sometimes am shocked. Like I had one before school let out, saying him and his family went and saw that Wild West movie out. I don't know. What was that?
Django Unchained?
No, it was like from Ted, the creators of Ted.
Oh.
It was a comedy, and I was just like,
A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Yes, that one. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know, but
I heard that was rough.
So it happens through movies and games, but no, I agree with you, DR. If you're old enough to be able to talk about it, then yeah, go for it.
And it's sad when because again, I play a lot of the games online, and I'll be talking with some of my friends, and you'll hear this little kid come on, so hey man, how are you guys doing? And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Who let you into GTA? I mean, guys are running around here killing people left and right, and you've got this little kid who's impressionable. He just wants to be welcomed. I'm like, man. it's not the place. I've told my daughter, I've said, if you play, something, go into a private session if you're going to play some of these teen games that are a little rough. I said, at least that way I know you're playing with your friends and can control the language, because sometimes you have no idea who stops and comes running through your game.
Oh, and I think this actually connects back to what we were saying earlier about parenting in terms of what's valued societally and what's compensated for.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, there are parents who want their children's content to be controlled for them so they don't have to, and that seems like bad parenting.
Uh-huh.
But it's unfair to assume that every parent actually has the time, because part of what you're dealing with is things like single parents who have to work multiple jobs just to pay their bills.
That's right.
And so there we start to get into some much broader issues of what we should be doing societally in terms of what we value. And I'm not going to open that up just discussion.
That was a good TED Talk.
Yeah.
We can change the world by getting more people to play games.
Well, it's potentially yes.
Yeah,
maybe.
That was an interesting TED Talk.
Yeah. So, since it sounds like no one who's actually present right now has additional questions with Twine, I'm going to go ahead and do a little tutorial, go through a couple of things that I saw as common errors in the class's first assignments, for the benefit of people who will be watching later. If this may be helpful to you folks as well, but I want to make sure that content is there for anyone who wasn't able to be here and ask questions, and goes to watch the archive and is like, but wait a minute, okay, this is great, sci-fi novels and parenting advice, but what about my assignment? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to...
mine right now, and it's really cool.
What was that?
I said I'm actually working on mine right now, and it's really cool.
Good. So I'm going to go ahead and...
You multitasking woman.
Well, I figured if I'm going to be here, I might as well,
Hey, if I could do it, Deanna, I would. I'm just jealous.
I'm actually doing mine. I'm not doing mine on my thesis.
Oh.
She got permission.
Well, I was going to ask for permission. I'd probably do it anyway because of where it's going, but I'm tackling the topic of teenage pregnancy.
Oh, wow.
The three choices: to have the baby, to put the baby up for adoption, or to have an abortion.
Yeah, I've done 3 films, each one different ending. Interesting. Tough topic.
Wait a minute. Deanna, had you asked for permission? Because I know actually some people have asked if they could do something else for someone.
I haven't yet.
And I approved it. Okay.
This is her proposal right now.
You got called live.
No, I haven't asked yet, but the idea popped in my head, and if I don't do something about it now, then.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, send me an email or a message over FSO with a few details of it so I can actually formally approve it, please, sometime before the assignment's due.
No, I wasn't putting you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
We don't want other students to watch this and get the idea they can just change it too.
Well,
extracurricular.
Well, and my rule of thumb has been that I generally do approve alternative assignments in this class. I just want to hear about them first.
Yeah.
I probably should really formalize that.
Hey, Daddy.
But I don't have that in there as well. Actually, okay, there's one place where I do. And in week 4, when you get to the comics discussion board, you will see that I actually have in there a specific. If you are completely unfamiliar with comic books and comic strips, you can contact me for an alternative assignment. Because what I've found is that I don't get anyone in this class who has zero experience with games. Some who have incredibly low experience. Some who have developed a strong dislike of games. But no one who doesn't have any experience with video games. Yeah. Very, very, very nearly. Whereas every month I will have a couple of students who really not only don't but haven't read comics. It's just never been important. And I'm talking about newspaper strips and editorial cartoons as well as comic books.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's.
That was the only thing I found worthy reading them in the paper were the comics.
Exactly.
I still have my Calvin and Hobbes comics that I've kept.
I
still have my books.
The original release, just because I was like, these comics are going to be worth something someday.
Well, up on a shelf you can't see over there, I've got the complete Calvin and Hobbes and the complete Far Side.
Yeah. Mine are in my office as well. That's awesome.
I also have all of the Bloom County anthologies ever put out, except for a virtually impossible to find, and I haven't been willing to go on eBay and see if I could pay $100 for it. I just had, collection of student work that Bert Breathitt did.
Yeah, my daughter and I did Bone a few years ago with her school, and they were like, "What is this?" I was like, "Guys, this is a comic you need to watch. You need to read it. You need to enjoy it. It's an adventure."
When I was doing my doctoral work, I helped bring Jeff Smith to the University of Florida to talk about Bone at conferences. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. My copy of Bone is signed.
Yeah, I bet.
I actually got a comic book in the thrift store the other day. I got a stack of comics, and most of them were worth like $10, $14. And I came across one, and it was worth $200.
Wow.
It was a Marvel. It was like, I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was like White Ghost or Werewolf something or other. I don't know. It was. I had never heard of that character before, but it was the first appearance. So that was cool.
Yeah, I've got the Dark Knight pencil edition, which is kind of cool. Just the artwork and pencil sketch before they inked it, before they colored it, which is kind of nice.
If we wanted to turn this into a real comics fest, I could bring some things. No. That's awesome. That's totally awesome. I only say that because I do want to go ahead and get on to doing the screen share, common errors in Twine things. So I'm going to screen share right now, and let's see, bring up Twine. Oh. Okay, and I'm going to see if I can lock this. It should be locked on mine now. Okay, so hopefully that should only show my screen. Right now we get this little infinitely receding window of the Google Hangout.
Oh, wow.
But, okay, so now we have Twine. Oops, I didn't mean to... there. So here we have, a Twine story as it appears when you open Twine. One of the most common little formatting errors I saw with Assignment 1 is people go into title their story, and they do this. Oops, put the typo there. Well, if you do that, instead of a passage that will insert the title of your story into the Twine when you build it, you now have a passage titled My Story, and Twine no longer knows what to do with it. It's just a regular passage now. In fact, in as much as it's your story, I also saw, in the similar lines, like people would put, so now they've got a passage with their name on it, but it says that their story is anonymous. Along the same lines, if you do rename your start passage, now you can always create another one. But
I thought you said not to.
You know what happens? It's now just a normal passage like any other one.
Wow.
If I were to try and build this now, let's do this, test play. Oh, no start passage.
Right.
It can't do it. There's nothing to display. Now, if you do something like this, you can always open a new Twine story.
Dr.
You
Tofu,
can
you
just,
can't see when you preview it.
oh, what is it?
When you go to the browser window, we can't see that. You're only sharing Twine.
Okay, well, that's fine. I don't really need to share the browser window. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know.
Just letting you know.
Yeah. But if but see, I messed up and I renamed my start passage call to adventure. I can always just create a new passage and title it start, and then in the relatively new build of Twine, this build has only been out for what is it, about 4 or 5 months now. It actually shows you that this is a special passage by changing the color. That's relatively new. For most of the time I've been teaching Twine, it wouldn't do that for you. So, the software's been improving as we've been going along. So,
yeah, I like the color because it lets you see what was working and what wasn't working.
Right. Another very common error is that people will not pay attention to capitalization. If you have this passage attempts to link to 1 with a lowercase o, and this passage is passage 1 with a capital O. It's pretty easy to catch this in the new version of Twine because there won't be a link between the passages, and this is another thing the newer version of Twine does that it didn't used to. When you attempt to create a passage that has links to passages that don't exist, when you close the window, it prompts you to create those passages. This is wonderful. Twine didn't used to do this. Yeah. So I can, so right there. I just created apple, quince, grapefruit, motor oil simply by calling for them in this passage. Yeah. Now this passage right here illustrates something that is sloppy use of Twine that I see people do, and that you can actually often get away with on assignment 1, but the branching dialogue will really come back to bite you. Right here. If you create a passage without a vertical bar in it, then the text in the square brackets will appear on screen when we do a test play, and will also be the name of the next passage. It's much better put the text you want to appear on screen for the player before a vertical bar, and then put the name of the next passage afterwards. This syntax will save you a lot of headaches when you're trying to fix a Twine you've built. Why? Let's make another passage here. Now we can have this link without having to have the link be the word that we used for the name of the passage. In this case, we could also write this way. Because we know that we want the word apple to appear on screen and be a link to the player. So that gives a few words. But imagine that this was our first one, and this is the link we wrote. Now, our passage is, it is an apple. Then, when we come over here to choose, we have a problem because we can't go, I want an apple. We have to go, I want Let's type this now. Oh, it is an apple. Okay, we're creating another whole new passage. Let's clean this up a little bit. The point being, if you use short, clear titles for your passages, then it'll be really easy for you to see what your passages are in Twine, and you can easily create different links to them without having to worry to title them. If you don't use this vertical bar in your links, then you end up getting stuck with whatever the title of the passage is, and that title has to appear in all of your links. So here we have, there's a legend about a hidden treasure trove. You go to investigate. If we don't use that vertical bar to split our links, we have to put this text. It says outer cave here, and it's very awkward. That's going to appear on the screen. If you go, outer cave? What the heck does that mean? On the other hand, you can make you go to investigate into the link. This is what will show up on screen for the player. They'll be able to click it. And clicking you go to investigate will lead them to the passage, outer cave. Now, what I just did here is a link based on an action and a scene transition. Having branching narrative showing the big picture was the goal in Assignment 1. In Assignment 3, this is really important, what I'm looking for is a conversation between two characters. So I don't want to see actions or scene transitions, except possibly minor ones, like a handshake, or as endings to the scene of branching dialogue. It's branching dialogue, it's a conversation. If you make really horrible choices in your conversation with the old prospector, maybe he does pull a gun and shoot you. But he doesn't pull a gun, shoot you, and then you click a link that says fire back. The moment he pulls the gun on you, the conversation is over. So that's what I'm looking to see for Assignment 3 is a conversation. Think of other common mistakes. I think that covers really the highlights of things that I've seen and heard about in the past week, where I think people could easily spare themselves a lot of headache and earn grades that would be higher than they might otherwise if they just make sure of a few simple things. Check your links, make sure they work. Don't change the titles of your key passages, of your special purpose passages, and make sure you're focused on a single conversation. Okay, I think that'll do for an end to the tutorial section of this live session. So let me stop screen sharing. Okay. So, okay, that's it for the kind of quick didactic bit. Do this, don't do that. It's now a little past 10:30, so we should wrap up soon. Anyone have anything they want to either ask about or well, except for the moment, I'm going to actually say, I don't have any questions at this point. Once we deal with any questions people have, then I'll give people a chance to wrap up any thoughts they have or kind of comments they want to make. So, questions?
How elaborate should our branching dialogue be? Like, any suggestion on that?
Well, you have to have 15 branch points.
Okay.
Oh, that actually would have been worth a tutorial. I'll screen share to illustrate what I mean by a branch point.
Okay.
So is that 15 branch points like all together, or is that like 15 branch points initially that we in turn have to branch off of?
You have to have a minimum of 20 passages total.
Okay.
Of those, at least 15 of those passages have to be branch points. Branch points, which I don't want to change the title. What's with my typing tonight? A branch point is any passage that offers the player a choice between two or more things to say. Not to be risky or risky for me. Okay. So, here we have a branch point. Why is this a branch point? Well, the old prospector has a line, and then the player has a choice of 3 different lines for the protagonist to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Note here that I do something that you often will have to do late in a branching dialogue in order to make it converge, in order to make it kind of file back down to a reasonable number of choices, but that is often a undesirable thing to do early on or any more than is necessary. Both gold, of course, and I'm looking to make my fortune go to the suspicion passage, where the old-timer, old prospector will react with suspicion to the player because, he's trying to guard his hoard. Apparently the old prospector isn't really all that clever, because if you say you're just passing through, he instead will give you a chance to get some hints from him about what the area is like. So, not that canny, but then again, he is drinking, and who knows how far into that bottle of whiskey he is. Now, if this passage only contained this link, it would not be a branch point. It would still be a passage, but there's no choice offered to the player.
Okay.
If this passage only contained these two links, it still would not, in any meaningful sense, be a branch point. If you have a couple places in your branching dialogue where there are two choices for the player and they link to the same passage, and you don't do it too often, then that's just fine. And if and if that passage makes a difference between having enough branch points or having too few, I'll count it. But I have had people turn in branching dialogue that looks like this. This is not branching dialogue. There are no decisions to make here that actually have consequences. Players pick up on this kind of thing really quick, and boy, do they hate it.
Yeah.
It's also not a challenge intellectually. So it's not only is it a really bad example of attempting to write branching dialogue, it also fails to engage with the goals of the assignment. So, just in case anyone's wondering, do not do this. You will fail. So yeah, to be a branch point, you have to have at least two options for the player, and they have to be meaningful options. They have to go different places. That's what a branch point is.
Okay.
Overall,
but preferably 3.
Let me put it this way. You shouldn't only have 2 choice options. Where possible, have 3, sometimes maybe 4. But you will need, as you get toward the end of your story, to start converging, let us say to filing back down toward a reasonable number of endings. You can have no more than 3 endings. Endings are passages that don't have any outbound links. So right here we have 2 endings. And we have a really simple functional structure, even if the syntax is completely, without meaning. And you can see here how it's okay to have part of a branching dialogue go off in one direction and then just converge back into another line of the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. What the player got out of going this route, imagine that this is a group of, say, half a dozen passages with several links between them, is a little bit of a different perspective on the story, some additional information, and in some cases in games, there might be some changing of variables. Perhaps going this way in the conversation with the old prospector earns more of his trust and gives you a chance to come back to him later and purchase mining equipment he doesn't need. Or he gives you a hint about the fact that there are some, desperately hungry wolves off to the south. If you go that way, you're likely to be attacked. But even if there is no system effect, no change of numbers or stats, the player got a different experience through the story. That's valid. Does that sufficiently answer your question?
Yes.
Anyone have any follow-up questions from there, or additional questions about design?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
No, that's good.
So I'll go ahead and...
A lot of what you're talking about, I couldn't see.
Couldn't see it clearly, or couldn't see it at all?
I'm looking at your daughter right now. A lot of times I was only getting that image.
Oh, okay. What that means is that were other people able to see the twine
Yes.
passages?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what that means is that, Laura, the connection between my computer and yours wasn't always good, so you got a placeholder image. If you go and look at the video that'll be uploaded to YouTube, I will send out the link to that. You can skip through the video, just this tutorial section at the end, and
Okay.
it'll be there. It'll be there in the video on YouTube. It's just that the internet connection somewhere between me and you wasn't good enough for you to get those images live at the time. So take a look at that.
Good deal.
And then get back to me if you have questions. I mean, that goes for everybody. Everyone who is seeing this live or recorded. If you have questions, ask. I will do my best to get answers back in a timely fashion. It's hard when I've got a really large class like I do this month, but I'll do my best to get you answers in enough time before the assignment's due. If you get me your questions by, midnight Friday night, you will have an answer by Saturday. If you ask me on Sunday, you might not get an answer in time to apply it before the work is due. That's my best attempt to be realistic with you about how the weekend may go. Okay. Well, okay, I think we've wrapped up the kind of scholarly portion of this. I see we've got a couple of people watching. I don't see any comments on the stream page, so I'm going to assume for the moment that the people who are watching the stream don't have any questions. Anything else you folks want to talk about before we break for the night?
I'm good.
Okay.
This was good.
Good. I will send out the link to the video on YouTube when it posts, and when I do so, I'll send that to the entire class as an announcement, and I will include a link to, well, I don't think it's available free online, but the novel Ethan of Athos, information about it or where you can get it, plot summary, something like that, with that email. Was there anything else that we referenced that people would like a link to? That's the only thing I can think of.
The video game, the movie, can you send a link out for that?
Right, yes. I'll send out a link to the video game, the movie.
It's available on iTunes.
Oh, and with it, I will also send out a link to Gaming in Color, which is another recent documentary that is about the queer community in video gaming. So I'll send out links to both of those. A couple of documentaries for enrichment purposes. Again, no one has to watch these, but they're both recommended. Well, let's call it a night then. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. And I sent you a message, Professor.
Okay, good. Very good. Okay, ending the broadcast in 3, 2, 1, and broadcast.